Hi, this video is about the composition of blood. Adult humans have between 4 and 6 liters of blood in their body. We'll call it 5 liters on average. And if you recall from the topic that we covered on the heart, the cardiac output, the average cardiac output is about 5 liters per minute. So that means that all of the blood in the body is going through the heart and through the complete circuit about once a minute on average. Now, the blood is part of the circulatory system, part of the lymphatic and the immune system, and is really a tissue that connects many other systems together, hence a connective tissue. If you take a sample of blood in a test tube and you spin it down in a centrifuge, you start to see the basic components of blood. A centrifuge, when it spins, brings the heaviest materials to the bottom and the lightest materials to the top. And blood will separate so that at the bottom are all of the red blood cells or erythrocytes. There is a thin layer on top of that that's called the buffy coat, which contains the white blood cells and the platelets. And then on top of that is the liquid portion of the blood known as the plasma. Now, you may have heard the term hematocrit. Hematocrit refers to the percentage of the blood volume which is made up of packed red blood cells. So these are packed because they've been in a centrifuge. And 45% is a very average normal value for hematocrit. We're going to talk about each of the components of blood individually, but I want to go through what each one comprises in this brief episode. So first, let's talk about the plasma, the liquid portion of the blood. Plasma contains, is about 55% of the blood, contains water, nutrients, all the things that have been absorbed from the stomach and intestine, or that have been stored and are now released by the liver. Those nutrients are circulating in the bloodstream to be delivered to the tissues. Gases, both carbon dioxide and oxygen. Carbon dioxide on its way to be gotten rid of, oxygen on its way to the cells to be used to make ATP. Nitrogenous wastes, these are breakdown products from muscle catabolism primarily. And they are toxic. So when you get to the urinary system, we'll talk about how the blood is cleansed of those nitrogenous wastes. For now, it's enough to know that they're in there. Plasma also contains electrolytes, which are charged particles like sodium, potassium, chloride, and so on. Sodium is the dominant cation in the blood, and it has the largest effect on where the water portion of the blood goes. So when the body needs more water to come into the blood, sodium is what it uses to bring more water in. If water needs to leave the blood, then sodium is moved out of the blood so that water will follow. So sodium is super important in terms of blood volume. Finally, the plasma contains proteins. Now, there are 3 main proteins that we find in the plasma. The most abundant one is albumin, which is the same protein that you find in egg white. Albumin is because it is the most abundant protein in the plasma, is also the one that's most responsible for blood volume. So between albumin and sodium, those are the tools that the body uses most to adjust blood volume. And I'll talk about an example of that in a moment. In addition to albumin, we have fibrinogen, which is the precursor to forming blood clots. So we'll get to that in this topic later on. And finally, globulins, which is short for immunoglobulins, which is another term for antibodies. Those are circulating in the blood, and we'll get to talk about those when we get to the immune system. Now, in the buffy coat, we have 2 types of what are called formed elements. Actually, let me say that first. We have the plasma, and then anything that is bound by a membrane is known as a formed element. So the buffy coat, which contains white blood cells and platelets, as well as the red blood cell layer, these are all of the formed elements of the blood. The white blood cells consists of neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes, eosinophils, and basophils. And we're going to talk about the specific functions of each of those cells, though we will get more into some of them when we get into the immune system. And we're also going to talk about platelets. That will be in this topic when we talk about blood clotting, because platelets work together with fibrinogen to form the blood clots. Red blood cells are known as erythrocytes, and this is where we will spend most of our time in this topic, talking about the erythrocyte life cycle and its specializations, because after this topic we will move on and talk about the respiratory system, and the red blood cell has a very important role in that. Okay. Oh, I was going to say something about plasma proteins. I can't show you a slide on the whiteboard, but you may have heard of a disorder known as kwashiorkor, and some of you will know how to pronounce this even better than I can. But this is a disorder that happens, it translates, as I understand it, to mean that it's the disease that happens after a baby is weaned off of its mother's milk. So what happens is that in particular regions of the world where there is not ample protein in the diet, babies get protein from the breast milk, but as soon as they're weaned from their mother's breast milk, they're no longer getting protein in their diet. Now they're getting enough calories in the other food that they're eating, but it's all carbohydrates. It's not the protein that the body needs. And without eating the protein, then the body lacks the amino acids to be able to make albumin. So the liver makes albumin, but it uses the amino acids from what we eat. So if children don't receive enough protein in their diet, they don't have the amino acids to make albumin, and their blood loses part of what helps it to hold on to water. And as a result, especially in the vessels of the belly, edema starts to develop. And instead of the blood being able to hold on to the water leaks out of the vessels and accumulates in the belly. And you will see these very emaciated children with very round tummies. And that's kwashiorkor, and it happens because the body's not able to make albumin because of a dietary deficiency in protein.